The metal was heavier than it looked. Admiral Rael Drusk held it in one hand for a moment before letting his aide pin it to his chest. The ceremony hall on Dominion Command Station was full, every seat taken. Screens across a dozen worlds carried the live feed. 164 wars, 164 victories, not a single loss, not even a close call. The Dominion's military record was the cleanest in the known galaxy, and Drusk's name was stamped on the last 42 entries. He gave a short speech. He had given it before, more or less. Different words, same meaning. We are the greatest force this galaxy has ever produced. Our enemies choose war and receive ruin. The Dominion does not fail. The audience liked it. They always liked it. What he did not notice, because he was busy accepting applause, was the junior officer standing near the back exit with a data pad in his hands and a look on his face that did not match the mood of the room. His name was Kas. He was 23 years old. He had been trying to get someone to look at his report for 6 hours. The report was about a planet, a small 1/3 position in an unremarkable system, mostly covered in salt water and thick atmosphere. Its inhabitants called it Earth. Kas had flagged it because the passive sensor sweep showed something unusual. Not a fleet, not weapons, just a pattern in the electromagnetic noise that did not fit a pre-contact civilization. Too organized, too quiet, like something running on low power and trying not to be seen. He had submitted the flag at midday. It had been deprioritized twice. By the time the ceremony ended and Drusk walked off the stage with his new medal catching the light, the invasion order for Earth had already been signed. Counselor Bren had approved it at a routine session that afternoon, between 2 other items on the agenda. He had not read the full brief. His aide had summarized it as a Class 3 primitive world with no formal defense structure. Bren had nodded and moved on. Kas tried one more time to reach someone in the intelligence chain. He sent the flag directly to Fleet Marshal Doran's office. The response came back 14 minutes later. Acknowledged. No further action required at this time. Kas sat down at his desk and stared at his screen for a while. Then he saved a personal copy of the report to his private archive and went to get something to eat. Across the galaxy, on the planet in question, a woman named Yara Solano was standing at the window of her office when her assistant knocked and opened the door. The assistant did not say anything. She just walked in and placed a single printed card on the desk. Solano turned, picked it up, read the 4 lines on it and set it back down. The card said, Drakvari Invasion Declaration confirmed. Transit time to Earth orbit, 11 days. Solano had been director of Earth's Unified Defense Authority for 9 years. Before that, she had spent 20 years working inside the program that built the authority from nothing. She knew this day was coming. She had built her entire career around the assumption that it was coming. When she told people what she did for a living, she usually described it as waiting. Expensive, complicated, deeply technical waiting. She walked to the command room at the end of the hall. 12 people were already at their stations. They had received the same alert. Nobody was panicking. Nobody was running. 2 of them were quietly updating preloaded deployment files. One was on a call with Commander Pyatt Harlow at the Deep Space Coordination Post inside the Trojan asteroid belt, 200 kilometers from the nearest human ship and completely invisible to any standard sensor sweep. Solano sat at the head of the table. She looked around the room once. "Start the clock," she said. That was all. The clock started. 11 days, it was enough time. They had planned for 8. Back on the command station, Drusk was having dinner with 3 senior fleet commanders. The conversation was relaxed. They talked about the Earth assignment the way experienced soldiers talk about minor work orders. A primitive world. No fleet on record. No defense treaty with any known power. It would be quick. Clean. Drusk planned to send 700 ships because that was the standard deployment size for a first-contact conquest, not because he thought he needed 700 ships. One of the commanders made a joke about the planet being too easy to bother nomming a battle after. The others laughed. Drusk smiled. He had no way of knowing that at that same moment, 60 warships were powered down and sitting completely cold inside an asteroid field 2 light years from Earth's sun. that they had been sitting there for 2 years, waiting, that every crew member on every one of those ships had been hand-selected, trained in silence, and given orders that only activated when the clock started. He had no way of knowing that analyst Nadia Reyes, a 31-year-old woman in a basement room in Oslo, had predicted the Drakvari invasion date within a 4-day window using nothing but passive sensor data and 6 years of behavioral modeling on Dominion expansion patterns. He had no way of knowing any of this because the Dominion's intelligence on Earth was built on what they could see, and humanity had spent 60 years making sure there was almost nothing to see. The metal on Drusk's chest caught the light again as he reached for his glass. 164 victories. He was not thinking about the 165th. The scout ship Vereth 9 dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system and ran its standard survey in just under 4 hours. It was a 3-person crew. The pilot, a sensor operator, and a classification officer named Tev who had done this 41 times and considered it routine. They flew a wide arc around the outer planets, cataloged the gas giants, noted the asteroid fields, and spent about 20 minutes looking at the third planet from the star. They recorded city grids, atmospheric carbon output consistent with early industrial development, radio signals in the lower frequency bands, a number of small orbital platforms that matched the profile of communication relays and weather monitoring equipment, several short-range spacecraft in low orbit that carried no weapons signatures. Tev filled out the classification form: Class 3 Primitive World, Pre-warp Drive, no standing military fleet detected, no planetary defense grid, no registration with any interstellar body, threat level negligible. He sent the report to Fleet Admiral Drusk's Advanced Command, and the Vereth 9 left the system. It took them 4 hours to survey the entire solar system. In those 4 hours, they missed a great deal. They missed the listening posts. There were 9 of them, each one buried inside a hollowed-out rock in the outer asteroid belt, running on minimal power cells and completely cold to thermal sensors. Each one had been placed there over a period of 12 years by cargo ships with modified hulls and no external markings. The posts did nothing active. They just listened. They captured every transmission the Vereth 9 sent and relayed it back to Earth on a tight beam frequency that was too narrow and too brief for the Scout's sensors to detect. They missed the drone perimeter. 230 automated drones sat in low-emission standby mode in the space between Jupiter and Saturn, spread out across a volume of space wide enough that no standard sweep would catch more than 1 or 2 at a time. Individually, they looked like debris. Together, they were a detection web that could track a fleet from the moment it dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Every drone had been assembled in orbit, painted the same color as the surrounding rock, and given a power profile that matched the background noise of the solar wind. They missed the fleet. 60 warships, parked cold inside the Trojan asteroid cluster at Jupiter's L4 point, not drifting, anchored, each one surrounded by a loose shell of genuine asteroid rock that had been slowly gathered and positioned over 3 years. No heat, no active systems, no electromagnetic output above background levels. The ships had been sitting there for 2 years in what Earth's engineers called cold sleep mode. The crews rotated in and out every 4 months on vessels that looked like ore transports. When analyst Nadia Reyes received the Drakvari scout report through the listening post relay, she read it twice. She noted exactly which sensor frequencies the Vereth 9 had used, which orbital altitudes it had covered and which it had skipped. She wrote a 2-page summary and attached it to the ongoing deployment brief. The summary said 3 things. 1. The Drakvari sensor doctrine had not changed since their last known survey operation. 2. Every Earth asset in the solar system had remained undetected. 3. The enemy fleet would approach from the ecliptic plane, probably in tight battle formation, because that was how they had approached every other target in the last 15 years. She had been saying that last part for 6 months. It was why Harlow's ambush positioning was set at the ecliptic, not above or below it. Commander Pyatt Harlow read the summary in his anchor post deep inside the asteroid cluster. He forwarded it to his 12 ship commanders with a single line of his own added at the bottom. It said, "Nothing changes. Stay cold." The ship commanders acknowledged, then they went back to waiting. On Earth, the waiting had a different texture. The population did not know. The Defense Authority had made a deliberate choice 40 years earlier to keep the program classified at the highest level. Not because they thought people could not handle it, but because a secret that 600 people know is a secret. A secret that 6 billion people know is a news story. And a news story would have been visible to anyone watching. So the cities went about their business. People went to work. Schools ran their lessons. The orbital traffic around Earth moved on its regular schedule. A cargo freighter left for Mars. A maintenance drone did its rounds on the outer communication satellites. 2 researchers at a station near Ganymede ran a planned experiment on Jupiter's atmospheric composition and filed a dry report that nobody would read for weeks. And in the basement of the Defense Authority building, Rios updated her tracking model with the scout ship's departure vector and calculated the earliest possible arrival date for the invasion fleet. 9 days, maybe 10. She pulled up the solar system display on her main screen. Every listening post showed green. Every drone showed green. The fleet at L4 showed 60 green lights in a cluster, cold and invisible and ready. She leaned back in her chair and looked at the screen for a while. The Drakvari had sent their best sensor ship. It had flown through the solar system and seen what Earth wanted it to see. A quiet little world. No threat. Easy target. Rios had spent 6 years building a cage. The door was still open. She was waiting for the animal to walk in. 712 ships crossed the heliopause in a formation so clean it looked like a diagram. 3 fleet carriers in the center. Escort wings spread wide on both flanks. Attack groups stacked in layers behind the forward screen. It was textbook Dominion battle order, the same formation that had been used in 42 consecutive conquest operations. It worked every time. There was no reason to change it. Drusk watched the formation from his command deck and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The planet was on the long-range display, a blue smear at the edge of the sensor field. His fleet would reach optimal engagement range in 6 hours. He planned to spend the first 4 of those hours reviewing supply logs. Fleet Marshal Doran stood beside him and watched the same display. He had been quiet since they crossed into the system. Something about the sensor returns bothered him. They were too clean. Every survey operation generated some level of clutter, old signals, debris echoes, background interference. This system was producing almost none. He thought about mentioning it and decided against it. He had been wrong about quiet systems before. Quiet usually just meant empty. At 4 hours out, Drusk opened the planetary broadcast channel. This was also standard. Every conquest operation opened with a formal surrender demand. Some species responded. Most did not. The ones that did not respond were treated the same as the ones that did. The fleet moved in regardless. Drusk read the demand in a flat voice. He identified the Dominion. He stated the terms: immediate cessation of all resistance, transfer of governmental authority, full compliance with occupation protocols. He gave the planet 40 minutes to respond. He fully expected silence. The response came in 8. It was audio only, male voice. Calm, unhurried, speaking in a language the Dominion's translation engine needed 3 seconds to process. When the translation came through, the words were plain. You are inside an active weapons engagement zone. This is Commander Pyatt Harlow of Earth's Unified Defense Authority. Earth does not accept your terms and will not be surrendering. I recommend you hold your current position and wait for further communication. Drusk stared at the speaker grill for a moment. Then he laughed. It was a short laugh, the kind a person makes when something is so far outside normal that the only reasonable response is to treat it as a joke. He looked at Doran. Doran was not laughing. Drusk opened a response channel. He told Harlow that Earth had no fleet and no defense grid, and that his recommendation was noted but would not be followed. The fleet would continue its approach. Any further resistance would result in elevated response force. Harlow did not reply. For 11 minutes, nothing happened. The fleet moved forward. The planet got bigger on the display. Drusk went back to his supply logs. The sensor operators watched their screens and saw what they had always seen: empty space, slow stars, background noise. Then EDS Ironclad appeared. It came out of the asteroid debris field at Jupiter's trailing edge at close range and moving fast. The Dominion's proximity sensors screamed. Before any gunner could find a targeting lock, Ironclad had already fired. Not at Drusk's flagship, not at the nearest escort. At the fleet carrier on the left flank, and the strike was not a single shot but a coordinated salvo from 4 separate weapons ports, timed to hit within a fraction of a second of each other, and aimed at the 3 structural weak points that every Dominion fleet carrier shared. Points that were not in any public record. Points that were in the classified engineering files that Earth had spent 11 years quietly obtaining through channels the Dominion did not know existed. The fleet carrier came apart, not all at once, in sections. The forward hull went first, then the power core lost containment, and then there was a very bright light and then debris. Ironclad was gone before anyone could fix its position. Back into the debris field, running cold, silent, invisible. The command deck of Drusk's flagship was very quiet for a moment. Doran opened his mouth. Drusk cut him off. He did not want analysis. He did not want caution. He wanted the fleet to accelerate. He wanted the forward attack groups pushed into engagement range immediately. He wanted every sensor array at maximum power and every weapon system hot. He gave the orders in a sharp, hard voice. The kind of voice that happens when a man is trying to sound like he is not surprised when he is very surprised. The fleet accelerated. The formation tightened slightly as the escort wings pulled inward, a reflex response from fleet commanders who had just seen one of their carriers vanish. Tightening the formation was the trained response. Close the gaps, concentrate the firepower. It was the exact thing that Earth's battle planners had predicted they would do. Rias had included it on page 4 of her engagement projection. She had written, "Under threat, Dominion fleet commanders will instinctively compress. This is trained behavior. Design the kill box accordingly." Harlow had read that page many times. In the asteroid cluster at L4, 60 ship commanders received a single-word signal from Harlow's post. It was not a question. It was not a request. It was one word in plain text, sent simultaneously to every crew in the fleet. The word was now. 60 ships woke up at the same time. Not slowly, not in sequence, all at once like a single organism throwing off sleep. Power cores lit. Weapons systems came online. Thrusters burned cold gas into hot exhaust, and the ships pulled free of their asteroid anchors with the kind of practice speed that comes from running the same drill 400 times in complete darkness. The drone perimeter went active 1 second later. 230 units across a volume of space 200 million kilometers wide, all transmitting simultaneously, feeding real-time targeting data into every ship's fire control system, through a relay chain that Earth's engineers had spent 3 years making impossible to jam. The Drakvari fleet was in the middle of it before their sensors understood what was happening. The first wave of fire came from 3 directions at once. Not from the front, not from where the fleet had been watching. From the flanks and from directly below the ecliptic plane, exactly where Doran had suggested putting sensor pickets 3 days ago, and Drusk had told him was unnecessary. 2 escort wings collapsed in the first 90 seconds, not because Earth ships were larger or faster, but because the targeting data was perfect. Every shot was informed by years of passive observation. Earth's crews knew the Dominion's hull configurations, shield cycling times, and engine exhaust patterns the way a mechanic knows a car they have been servicing for a decade. They knew where to hit, and they knew when. Drusk's formation shattered under the pressure of simultaneous fire from multiple vectors. The fleet commanders tried to respond, but their communication was already degraded. The drone net was not just feeding Earth's ships. It was also broadcasting interference on the Dominion's tactical frequencies in very precise, very targeted bursts. Not a full blackout. Something more surgical. Gaps in communication at exactly the moments when coordination mattered most. This was Rias's work. She had spent 2 years studying Dominion battle communication patterns and had designed the interference protocol herself. She called it a conversation interrupter. She had tested it on simulated formations until it worked 9 times out of 10. Against a real fleet in actual panic, it worked better. Drusk was not panicking. That was the one thing. He was wrong about almost everything else in this battle, but he was not a man who panicked. He stood at his command console and pushed orders into a communication system that was working intermittently, trying to reform the fleet into a defensive sphere formation, trying to get his remaining carriers to the center, trying to do in 5 minutes what should have been planned for in 11 days. Doran did not wait for orders. When the left flank collapsed and Drusk's attention was on the center, Doran took independent command of the 200 ships at the fleet's rear. He did something that no Dominion commander had done in 40 years of recorded battle history. He ordered a retreat. Not a full retreat, a fighting withdrawal, pulling the rear wing back toward the heliopause in controlled increments, maintaining formation, returning fire. It was ugly and it cost ships, but it was the right call. Doran understood what was happening even if he could not explain it yet. They had walked into something that had been built specifically to destroy them. The only answer to that was to stop walking forward. He managed to get 91 ships out. It would later be described as the only competent command decision made by the Dominion during the entire engagement. Drusk pushed deeper in. He had 2 fleet carriers left and roughly 300 ships in partial formation around him. He drove them forward, toward Earth, toward something to hit. The idea that he was losing did not fit. He had no framework for it. 164 victories meant that his instinct in a bad situation was always to attack harder, because attacking harder had always worked. He had never been in a situation where attacking harder was the wrong answer. It was the wrong answer. Captain Save Akafer's ironclad appeared again, this time from the inner debris field near Mars, and took out one of the 2 remaining carriers with the same coordinated strike pattern. Simultaneous hits on the same 3 structural points. Same result. The carrier came apart in sections. The 300 ships around Drusk lost cohesion. Without the carrier's command relay, their communication net degraded further. Individual commanders started making individual decisions, which is the last thing you want in a tight engagement zone covered by 230 active drones. Earth's ships picked them apart in groups, not with mass fire, methodically, prioritizing by threat category, working down the target list that Rias had prepared and Harlow had refined and every ship commander had memorized. The battle had stopped being a battle about 40 minutes in. It was closer to a clearance operation. Drusk's flagship was still fighting when the last of his escort wing went dark around him. His weapons were firing. His point defense was still cycling. But there was nothing left to coordinate with and nowhere left to go, and Earth's ships had closed the range to the point where point defense was not enough. When the ironclad pulled alongside and locked a tractor field onto the flagship's hull, Drusk was still standing at his console. The guns ran dry. The power core dropped to 10%. The lights on the command deck went from white to emergency red. 621 Dominion ships were gone. 14 humans were dead. 2 Earth ships were damaged badly enough to need repair. The battle lasted 2 hours and 19 minutes. Earth's after-action report later noted it as a successful execution of a pre-planned engagement scenario, with results within projected parameters. That was all it said. The flagship listed 9 degrees to port and stayed there. 3 of the 6 deck lights were dead. The main display still worked, barely, showing a sensor field full of debris that had once been ships Drusk knew by name. He sat in the command chair because his legs had stopped cooperating sometime in the last 20 minutes, and he had not noticed when. The chair was cold. The emergency heat had gone with the power core. Two crew members were still alive at their stations. Neither of them was doing anything useful. There was nothing useful left to do. Drusk looked at the sensor display for a long time. He kept trying to find the part where he had made the mistake, the obvious one, the single bad decision that explained how 700 ships became debris and smoke. He could not find it. He had done everything the way he had always done it. Formation, advance, press the attack. Those three things had worked 164 times. They should have worked 165th time. The communication console made a sound. A new channel request coming in. The signal was tight, clean, and coming from the direction of the inner system. He almost did not answer it, then he did. The voice was female, unhurried. She identified herself as Director Yara Solano of Earth's Unified Defense Authority. Drusk said nothing, he was listening. Solano did not ask for his surrender right away. She did something else. She told him why. Not why Earth fought. He understood that part. She told him how it had been done. She described the program that started 63 years ago, when Earth's first long-range passive sensor array picked up evidence of Dominion expansion moving in their general direction. She described the decision to never register Earth with any interstellar body, never file a fleet manifest, never broadcast military communications on any frequency that left the solar system. She described the listening posts in the outer asteroid belt, the drone net, the hidden fleet, the 11 years of classified Dominion engineering data obtained through sources she did not name. She described Nadia Ries's behavioral models, the 6-month prediction window for the attack, the engagement design that treated the solar system not as a place to defend, but as a machine for destroying a specific type of enemy fleet. Drusk listened to all of it. When she finished, he understood something that he had not understood since the battle started. This was not a surprise, not for Earth. He had been surprising. He was the one who had shown up without knowing what was waiting. Earth had known he was coming for 6 months. They had known Dominion fleets were coming for 60 years. He was not the hunter who walked into a trap. He was the reason the trap was built. He sat with that for a moment. Then he asked her a question, the only one he could think of that mattered. Why didn't you attack first? There was a brief pause on the line, not hesitation, more like the pause of someone deciding how direct to be. We don't start wars, Solano said. That's the only rule we never broke. Drusk looked at the sensor display again, all that debris, his ships, his crews, his record which was not his record anymore. You could have, he said. You had everything ready. Yes, she said. We could have. We didn't because we weren't the ones being attacked. He thought about Counselor Bren signing the invasion order between agenda items. He thought about the ceremony hall and the medal on his chest, and the speech about how the Dominion does not fail. He thought about Cass, the junior officer at the back of the room with the data pad, who had probably tried to flag this and been ignored. He asked Solano one more question. How many people know about your program, about all of this? Fewer than 700, she said, for 60 years. Drusk closed his eyes. 700 people had kept a secret for 60 years that had just destroyed the greatest fleet in the known galaxy. The Dominion had intelligence services, surveillance networks, informant programs on 40 worlds, and not one of them had ever found a single person willing to talk. He opened a broadcast channel. His voice was steady. He identified himself. He stated the date and his position. He said that the 165th Conquest Fleet of the Drakvari Dominion was no longer combat capable, and that he, Admiral Rael Drusk, was formally surrendering under standard interstellar cessation protocol. In 400 years of Dominion military history, no commander had ever broadcast those words. His two surviving crew members looked at each other and then looked at the floor. Solano acknowledged the surrender with the same calm voice she had used for the entire conversation. She said a tow vessel would reach his flagship within 3 hours. She said his crew would be treated according to standard prisoner protocols and released within 60 days. She said the cessation talks would begin as soon as communications could be established with the Dominion High Command. Then she said one more thing. She said, "For what it's worth, your fleet marshal made the right call when he retreated. Tell him that." Drusk did not respond to that. He closed the channel and sat in the red-lit silence of his ruined command deck and looked at the place on the display where his fleet used to be. He did not feel angry anymore. He was not sure what he felt. He reached up and took the medal off his chest and set it on the console in front of him. He looked at it for a while. Then he turned it face down so he did not have to look at the front. The news reached the Dominion High Command in pieces. The first piece was a gap in the fleet's regular position updates, which automated systems flagged as a communication anomaly. The second piece was a partial signal from Fleet Marshal Doran's retreating wing, fragmentary and badly degraded, that contained enough information to tell the communications officer who received it that something had gone wrong on a scale she had no category for. She sat on it for 4 hours before she told anyone, because she could not figure out how to say it. The third piece was a full surrender broadcast, clear and unencrypted, in Drusk's voice, which arrived on every military channel simultaneously and could not be suppressed because it was already in the public relay network before anyone realized what it was. Counselor Bren heard it while eating breakfast. He set down his utensils and did not pick them up again. By midday he had resigned. His written statement said he was stepping down for health reasons. Nobody who read it believed that, but nobody said so out loud, because most of the people who might have said so were also trying to figure out how personally responsible they were for the outcome, and whether saying anything would draw attention to themselves. The Dominion High Command held an emergency session that afternoon. 12 people in a room, 700 ships gone, and no framework in their collective experience for the situation they were in. They had a protocol for military defeats. It covered losing a battle, losing a campaign, losing a contested world. It did not cover a scenario where an entire conquest fleet met an enemy that did not officially exist and was eliminated in 2 hours. Junior Analyst Koss was reinstated before the session ended. Nobody apologized. He received a one-line message saying his previous flag had been reviewed and found accurate. He read it twice and filed it next to his personal backup of the original report. The retreat wing under Doran arrived at the nearest Dominion station 9 days later. 91 ships. Doran looked like someone who had watched everything he knew about war stop being true. He gave a full after-action report and answered every question. When asked why he retreated without orders, he said the alternative was dying in a battle already lost. They had no disciplinary category for that. On Earth, none of this was public. The Defense Authority sent its after-action reports through internal channels. Commander Harlow returned to the coordination post inside the asteroid cluster, which now had the additional job of managing the debris field cleanup. 14 caskets were flown back to Earth on a vessel with no markings. There was a service, small and private, attended by people who had signed the same secrecy agreements. Solano attended. She stood at the back and said nothing. Captain Okafor's crew received 2 weeks of leave. He took his to visit his family in Lagos. He did not tell them what he had been doing for the past 4 years. He told them he worked logistics. They believed him. Rhea started a new intelligence brief the same week. The engagement data had confirmed several of her modeling assumptions and challenged 3 others. She updated her parameters and started running projections on the next most likely threat vector. She expected to have a preliminary report ready in about 2 months. She sent a brief summary to Solano. Solano read it, made 2 margin notes and sent it back. This was their normal rhythm. 17 days after the battle, a Dominion diplomatic vessel arrived at Earth's outer orbital station under a white flag. It docked without incident. The diplomat who stepped off was a career Foreign Service officer named Kale, who had been given the assignment with approximately 36 hours' notice, and had spent most of the transit reading everything his government had on Earth, which was very little and almost entirely wrong. He had been briefed that Earth was a primitive world that had somehow managed an ambush. He expected a colony ship interior, functional but rough, the kind of place that a pre-contact civilization would build if it was trying to look like it belonged in space. The station was clean, well lit. The corridors were wide and the equipment was maintained, and the people he passed moved with the ease of people who had been doing their jobs for a long time. He passed a room where two technicians were running diagnostics on a sensor relay system that he did not recognize, and that looked considerably more sophisticated than anything in the Dominion standard equipment catalog. The station officer who met him was a woman in her 40s with a neat uniform and a data pad under her arm. She shook his hand. The gesture was unfamiliar to him, but he matched it. He asked her, because he had to ask someone, how long Earth had operated a military force of this scale. She thought about it, not because she did not know the answer. He got the sense she was deciding how much of the answer to give. Since the last time someone tried this, she said. She handed him a docking form and showed him to the conference room where the ceasefire talks would begin. Cale sat down at the table and looked at the water glass in front of him and tried to organize his thoughts. He had a prepared opening statement. He no longer felt like reading it. He had a list of Dominion positions and demands. He no longer felt like presenting them. He had the distinct and uncomfortable feeling that he was the one who had come here to surrender, not to negotiate. He was not entirely wrong.